The other day, we made a set of 3 teardrop-shaped chisels, a center, a left, and a right. But what do you do with them? Welcome back to Black Bear Forge. Today I thought I'd take a look at a simple project that uses those things, and I thought we would take a look at a leaf. And the leaf I have here is done the way that most people typically do it. It is done with just a straight chisel. It cuts the center vein and the side veins, and it looks very leaf-like. It really gives the right impression for leaf, even though on a real leaf the veins are raised instead of depressed. And with these chisels, we're still going to make the vein depressed, but it's going to be a whole different look. It's a little classier, more ornamental leaf, or perhaps a little more European or Gothic looking, depending on how you see these things. The basic forging of the leaf is quite simple, quite straightforward. In fact, none of this is very difficult. Once you've got the tools, the rest of this is pretty easy. So we're going to start with a piece of 1/2-inch square bar, and we're going to forge a simple leaf out of it, and then we're going to ornament it using our 3 teardrop punches. First thing I want to do is just forge a short point on the end of the bar. I'm just going to do that on 2-sided taper down to a point. Remember, keep your hammer off the edge of the anvil there so you don't bang up your anvil. So there's my little point. So next I want to isolate the mass that will become the leaf. It's between the edge of the anvil and the hammer here. And this will be the stem that I'm drawing out now, but the mass at the end will be the leaf. You could certainly use a guillotine tool and create a shoulder for this, but this is good practice trying to line your hammer and your anvil up. It's better when there's not a camera right there. And after you do a few of these, you kind of get a feel for how much material to leave. And it also depends on how long or skinny a leaf you want. You want to take this down fairly far at this stage, just to get all this stem material out of the way so you can finish the leaf. Before we're done, we will cut this off, obviously, and finish drawing out the stem. I think we're good enough to go ahead and finish forging the leaf at this point. Now be careful at this point. That's going to cool off a lot faster. And if you try to work it with this hot and that cold, you're going to crack it right there. To do this, I'm going to stand it up on the diamond with that taper down like that. I'm just going to spread this out. I don't want to spread the tip out too much because I want it to be pointy, but we can kind of tip the hammer and draw it out sideways if we want it a little bit longer. Remember, this is more about the chisel than the leaf, but I thought you'd want to see how I do a leaf if you haven't seen that video previously. So the shape of the leaf is really just up to you at this point. Next, we'll go ahead and use our new tools. Get in there a little bit, clean up that transition some. In this case, we are actually going to use the straight chisel for the center vein, and we aren't actually going to use that straight teardrop. So this doesn't show all 3 tools being used, but this is a dull chisel. It's one that I need to sharpen, but it doesn't leave a real sharp line. It leaves more of a narrow, fuller imprint. So that's the center vein of the leaf. And as we go to the teardrop tools, I want the curve to curve away from the center vein, but I want to angle it up. So they go in this fashion, And we do them in even pairs. We'll probably do 3, maybe 4, but we'll see how the spacing looks. Yeah, we'll probably do 4. This is a fairly chunky leaf, but you can already see that that's a much different look than just a chisel line would be. At least I hope you can see that. And the leaf starts to curve, but when we do the other side, it'll start to curve back. If you don't like the way the impression looks, you can always regrind the tool and soften it up or sharpen it up, whatever you think it needs. Now to set that off just a little bit more, I am going to use a curved chisel with a very similar radius curve in there and add a few more lines. And this goes in between the teardrop marks. Try and match it. That one I got pretty off. But if you could match the curve, I think my chisel isn't quite as accurate a match as I'd like it to be. So I should make a chisel that goes with those tools, just for this. But nevertheless, this does add a nice... Ooh, that's kind of messed up. This does add a nice contrast, just a little bit more interest. Now at this stage, that's a pretty boring leaf, but we're going to go ahead and cut it off, draw out the stem, then we'll try to make that leaf look a little more three-dimensional. I'm going to leave a fair amount for a nice long stem, just so we can add some more interest through the way we treat the stem. As always, try not to cut all the way through. Better to break it off than it is to smack your hardy. And like many things, it's faster to just do this over the horn. As it gets close, we can start straightening it at the face of the anvil. It cools off quick. So reheat it as often as you need to. You want the stem fairly thin. I want it, oh, maybe not as thin as 1/8 of an inch for this leaf, but I certainly want it well under 1/4. So roughly 3/16, I guess. What would that be? Maybe 4 millimeters? Just a guess. And what you do with the stem really just depends on what you're doing with the leaf. This one will just be a leaf for the sake of making a leaf. So with the stem drawn out, let's go do some shaping on the leaf end. The first thing I want to do is turn the face side down over a depression in my wooden stump here and use a ball tool. We've looked at ball tools before. I just want to drive it down and give it kind of a round front. Again, the shape sort of depends on what you're going to use the leaf for. That's pretty exaggerated, but we'll straighten that out quite a bit in the next step. Now I just want to find kind of a rounded section of the anvil and very gently bring that tip up. This is all just kind of stylized the way you want it. But try not to forge that down or you'll squish all your detail you just put in it. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks there. Let's go ahead and do something with the stem to make it more interesting now. I think I'll start just by offsetting that a little bit so we can put kind of a loop in there. And that way you can use it as a pendant or a key ring or something like that. This one's a little big perhaps for some of those uses, but I'm just going to take the scrolling pliers and put a little extra tight curl in here just to give it some character. Truth is, you don't really see leaves with that much little funky stuff going on in nature, but sometimes it looks neat in the forged stuff. And then since it might be used as a key ring or something like that, I try to bring this down so it touches in the front. Just fiddle with it until you get it the way you want it. I think on this one I'm going to tuck it behind because it's got plenty of material. And it really is just a matter of messing with it till you either get tired of messing with it, which is about where I'm at, or till you like it. And I'm somewhere in between. I like it pretty well, but I'm definitely tired of messing with it. So I think we're going to call that good. A little wire brushing here. Now what about finishing this? Now you can certainly use my typical paste wax finish, let it cool till it just melts the wax. Wax it, buff it up a little when it's completely cool, and that's good enough. You could bronze brush it now that it's down to black heat. That gives it a little bit of a golden patina, and that looks pretty good. But for this one, I think I'm going to polish it up a little bit so you can see the detail better. And to do that, I'm just going to do a little bit of light hand sanding. I'm starting with some 150 grit. Depending on how big and how rough the piece is, you might start with some 80 grit. But all I'm really trying to do is take the scale off of the high points, shine those up, and then the parts that we use the stamp on show up better. And I'll do the stem as well, at least most of the stem. Parts you can't get to, you just can't get to, and that's part of how this develops some character in there by not doing the entire thing. Then I'll follow that up with some 220 grit, and just lightly. It's important that you hand sand things like this. If you power sand them, it looks like it was done on a power sander or a grinder. The hand sanding is much more irregular, and people can't really tell that it was hand sanded as much as you can tell that it was power sanded when you do that. And finally, I will finish it up with just a little bit of Scotch-Brite, just to kind of buff the highlights there. And again, I will do the stem. But now I certainly don't want to heat this up again and scale it up to put wax on it or turn it blue or anything. So I'm just going to put finish on cold. And for that, I'm going to use a finish that we have talked about before. It is a beeswax linseed oil mix. During the summer, this should be liquid, but right now it is not. It's pretty soft and gooey, but it's not liquidy. And you can put it on with a brush when it's liquid. I'll just rub that in. And then this will take a while to dry. The linseed oil does take a little longer to dry than just the wax solidifying, so it's going to take a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean it might be a day or two. But that's what completes our leaf, and I think that has way more interest with those deeper teardrop shapes than just chiseling it in with a chisel. It's really up to what you want to do if you're making leaves. But give this a try and see what you think. And we will find other things to do with those teardrop chisels. This is just one example of how they might be used. And like so many things in blacksmithing, it's kind of up to your imagination how you do things like this. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I would love to hit that subscribe button down there. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wash your hands, and wear your eye protection. We'll see you later.